So this video is about ceremony, my first sweat lodge actually, and my first ayahuasca experience all tied into one. So pull out your popcorn because it's fun. My very first time doing ceremony in a natural way was doing a sweat lodge back in 2010, and then I did a few in 2012 again when I was working at the tracker school. And it was a beautiful experience because, again, you are close to the earth when you're doing it. And when that first sweat lodge was being run, there's probably close to 100 people that were in that sweat lodge. And it was made of different saplings that kind of made a dome shape over the earth, and then it was covered with blankets. Normally it would be covered with like hides. Back in the day it would be covered with like animal hides and things like that. And but at this time it was just covered with blankets to really keep the heat in. And you have to walk around this tree, the head of it, because it was shaped as a turtle, and Earth Mother is represented as a turtle because it's like you're going into the womb of the earth. And once you go in, they usually have two, at least two, sometimes four doors to kind of let the air in. And man, that first experience, like I said, was powerful because it went from them bringing in the hot rocks, closing all the doors, completely dark. You're in there in your bathing suit with 100 other people, to them pouring the hot water on the rocks, and you could just feel the steam fill the room. And they're hitting their shaker and they're singing their native chants, and you just start to really, if you focus on your breathing, you just really start to go inward, and then at some point you are just you're either in a place or you're in nowhere. I feel like the turtle, or the sweat lodge that represents the turtle, that represents the earth, like kind of like starts to take off and take you on your spiritual journey. And it's one of the oldest ceremony practices throughout many cultures, was the sweat lodge. And there's the fire keeper, there's the lead ceremony shaman that's normally running it. And again, there's some people out there that are running sweat lodges right now because they may have felt called, but they may have not learned from the elders or the masters of ceremony. And so some people may not be getting the same effects, but I was lucky enough to have had experiences working with people that knew what they were doing, and that was passed down, because it's almost like with that type of ceremony, it's like you are called by the elders to be a fire keeper, or to be running the chants and being the shaman of that sweat lodge. But when we took off in that first experience, I just felt like I was kind of like floating around in a void space, and eventually through the chanting it kind of drowned it out, and I was hearing a woman's voice crying, and I thought it was somebody in the sweat lodge. So I kind of opened my eyes for a minute, and it wasn't somebody crying in there. And again, this is 2012, and it's like I had meditated a lot from the time I was 18 to the time I was 2021. But it was almost like my spiritual ears and everything kind of came back online through that ceremony, but I didn't call it online. It was just like, it felt like my faculties opened back up again, and it was amazing. And so once I was hearing this woman like moaning and just like moaning, and I just kind of felt my body like sway, and it's like my stomach hurt and my heart hurt. And I finally had a vision of a woman in a dress running through the woods, and she kept looking back, and it was almost like a man was chasing her, but they were not, I knew they weren't representation of like a woman and a man. I knew that what it was representing was Earth Mother running from man. Now, whether that be from just the masculine or all of humanity, I didn't try to debate. But she kept falling and running and falling, and she was trying to bring her child with her, and she was falling with her child. And finally she was just exhausted and laid out there on the earth and said, I'm so tired. And all I could kind of do, I didn't know much about energy. I knew about going into astral projection by then. I knew about a little bit about energy and the spirits that I was encountering, but I didn't know how to protect her. And I started crying in the sweat lodge because I'm like, how do I protect you? And she was simply just saying, like, just come home. Like, just come home. And the guy didn't get her. Whatever the person was chasing after her didn't get her. But I don't know if I was pushing it away or exactly what happened. But to keep that story short, when I came out of the sweat lodge and I got to look at the stars, I felt like I was a child reborn. And I did not learn until days later that that's what actually the sweat lodge is meant to do. Because when I came out of there, I felt like I was rebirthed as a child in this vast universe. And I was so humbled to have had that experience and to be in nature. And we were instructed to go to our own sit areas somewhere out by ourselves. Again, this is probably after maybe an hour to 2 hour ceremony. You lose all track of time. And I went out into the woods by myself, laid up against a pine tree, and I just like had tears of joy as I was just looking at the stars and realizing how insignificant I was. And also having a stirring, like a fire stirring of like how much I wanted to help the earth. And from pretty much that moment on, for a very long time, I was doing as much as I could with, a few nonprofits and trying to, or whether it was working at other day camps, taking kids backpacking. I was just doing what I could. I stepped away from nonprofits because I saw how much extra money they had, like to where they would have to just rent offices to offload because they can only keep a certain amount of money in their accounts, where there would just be these empty offices. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, we could go be planting trees with this, or we could be giving money back. Like, it was really disgusting of what certain nonprofits do, not all of them, but I had just seen a lot of waste, and so I pulled back from that and was like, I'm gonna do a more one-on-one or group approach with helping people return to the earth as my commitment to Earth Mother to help her protect her. And so when I sat at that tree, I just felt completely reborn. And my life has never been the same since that moment, specifically in 2010, and then the other two that I had in 2012. Because of that sweat lodge, I can recognize Earth Mother's voice very, very clearly. And again, it is our job as humans to be caretakers of the earth. Even if you live in an apartment complex, you could take care of the area, just cleaning up the trash. She feels it. When you go on a hike, clearing up the trash, or cleaning up a little area just here and there, or just saying thank you as you walk, like she feels all of that. But yeah, those sweat lodges taught me about ceremony. Now, moving forward, my first ayahuasca ceremony, and this is important for me to share. Again, I don't share everything because I always tell people I work with, whether they're past clients or whether they've been students of mine, to kind of keep your vision, some of your stuff close to you. It's not all meant to be shared, but you can share some if you feel like it's going to help others. When I did my first ayahuasca ceremony, I had heard about it from a friend of mine probably 2 years prior, but I didn't feel called to do it. The time when I did go to do it, which was the first time was in 2013, I could hear Mama Aya come to me in dreams and at random meditations, right? Mama Ayahuasca will call you. If you're not being called and you just feel like you want to do it, that's not the calling. And anything I've done, whether it's go live in the woods and intern for 6 months, or go work with Mama Ayahuasca or any other plant ceremonies, there was a calling that was a knowing. I knew it and I couldn't deny it anymore. There was other times when she would come in my dream as a snake, and it took me a while to be like, oh, this is Mama Ayahuasca. I guess it's time for me to work with her. Sure enough, the time I decided, I think it was a week to 2 weeks later, that there was a gentleman that was going to be coming into California that was going to be doing a ceremony. That same friend had done ceremony with him before, so I also went through a recommended source of somebody that had worked with this shaman. Another very important factor, right? Receive the calling from whatever you're going to be working with, whether it's a plant medicine or should you go live off grid for a year, whatever it might be, it will call you and you will know it in your heart. And make sure if you are working with somebody in plant medicine that they have been recommended or that you know of their history. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Okay, so all this to tie in. When I went and did my first ceremony with this shaman, I was already in preparation doing the dieta, right? The dieta is removing sugar, salt, fatty foods, pretty much just drinking water, no sex, limited technology, things like that. When I went into ceremony, I knew how to hold space ceremoniously and hold my energetic bubble for myself because of having gone in sweat lodges and other types of ceremonies that were, natural ceremonies. And one of the biggest things I noticed immediately, I grabbed the corner. I noticed there was probably about 20 people there, maybe a little bit more, but everybody seemed so laxed and chill. And of that 20 people, there was maybe myself and two other people that were actually like holding our own space. And I could tell one girl was in deep prayer, like she was with it. And there was another woman that, people would try to talk to her and she'd be like, we can talk after, right? Nobody talked to me. I was just like head down and in prayer. But I noticed a vast majority of people that weren't preparing their own space. They weren't preparing their little ceremony space, and they were talking and engaging, which is cool, but the ceremony begins the minute you commit to it. And so I found that really interesting. Finally, when the shaman came in, this is something that is the reason I am the way that I am. He came in dressed in a white t-shirt and blue jeans, and so did his protege, his mentee. And I thought, this guy doesn't really look or feel like a shaman. Little did I know, this dude was a G. Like, he knew what he was doing. Comes and sits down and he starts scanning the room. And the only reason I knew he was scanning the room is my eyes were down and I was kind of like this and I felt somebody scanning me. So I looked up and he had just reached me and we locked eyes and he kind of did this and I did the same thing. It's like, thank you. And then he kept scanning the room. But when I looked around, nobody else was noticing the energy scanning that he was doing. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be real interesting. I'm just going to mind my own business. Ceremony begins. Lights are out, one candle's on, an emergency light for the exit and the bathrooms. Cool. And I take my first cup. He asked your intention. I told him my intention. He prayed over the cup. I prayed over the cup. I took my first drink of the whole cup and walked back to my area. And once I did, I started to watch some other people take their cup. And some people would just kind of come up and sit in the mat and be sitting like this. And I'm like, I had partial judgment. I'm not going to lie. But I pulled it back. I knew I was judging. And I just went to an observer state. And I was like, wow, people are really laxed for this ceremony. And I just kind of found it fascinating. But maybe they just weren't taught, was my final conclusion. Like maybe they just weren't taught about ceremony. So let me not judge. Let me come back into my space, which is what I did. Now, the minute this maestro started playing and chanting his Icarus, I just like started blasting off. And it was from that moment I was like, this guy knows what he's doing. Not just because I started blasting off. Obviously, there's a combination with Mama Ayahuasca, right? With the plant medicine. But I could even tell from that blast off, I was like, oh, the medicine was prepared for with love. Like, it felt like when it went in my body, it was prayed over. And even before we prayed over it together. And he also had another elder in the room. And about halfway through the journey, I'm just getting to the most important parts. About halfway through the journey, I started to see the grid, right? Like the energetic grid, which I didn't even know existed back in 2013, okay? And I could see him in his full light body. He was lit up. And his mentee that was to his right, also I could see his light, but it wasn't as powerful and as strong as the shaman that was sitting, across from me in the room, who was fully in his light body. And I went, holy crap, like this person really knows what they were doing. And I am super grateful And I think he still runs ceremony. Actually, I know he still runs ceremonies, but people that are meant to find him, we can connect at some point. Because again, you can't go to these ceremonies, some of these ceremonies, unless you're recommended from somebody, right? And when I saw him in his light body, I also would look around the room and I saw most people just like on their sides, like little babies. And I could hear people starting to like purge. And in my mind, I'd be like, yeah, purge, get it out. You know what I mean? And I only purged a little bit that first ceremony because it was only a one night. I ended up having to walk to the bathroom because that's, how I purge. But again, it's like most people, like nothing really comes out. And so, I would see people laying on their sides and I kept hearing, basically what I felt was God, but and it was also probably my higher self, my higher God connection. I heard that inner voice saying, your brothers and sisters are sick. Your brothers and sisters are very sick and they need help. And I could just take a wide angle vision of the whole room and I could see people rocking and uncomfortable and then get up and purge and then walking. And I sat up the whole ceremony either with my eyes closed and I could feel it, but I could see beyond my closed eyes. I could see with my third eye. Or when I opened my eyes, I could see it even more. And I just went, holy crap, like people are there. I could feel their energy stuck. And again, I did not look into them because I knew even then that breaks energetic protocol, that breaks spiritual protocol to look into somebody without their permission. Okay. I am very, if you learn from me, one of the biggest things I'll teach, beyond like ceremony preparation or spiritual hygiene is boundaries, energetic boundaries for yourself, right? It's in ceremony space and looking into others, okay? Because I don't believe in offensive energy unless somebody is looking into me and I've warned them twice. And by the third time, you're going to get something offensive from me. Like you're going to get I've given you the boundaries, right? So I definitely preach energetic boundaries of looking into other people without their permission, okay? Because it's such an intimate space. So without looking into them, just feeling the collective energy, I could be like, man, everybody's messed up and they're not able to get everything out. And then I could kind of feel the shaman like walking around. I couldn't see it, but I could kind of feel like there was an energy walking around the room and just kind of like rocking the babies awake or to, just be like, wake up, children, right? Which is the call of Earth Mother, which is the call of God, which was the call of the shaman. It just felt like this energy was saying, like, wake up, children, wake up, children. And even by the end of the ceremony, I knew not a lot of people were able to wake up. They just had too many blockages. And by the time the ceremony was over, I learned many, many things. But to keep it short, I learned from him, as I learned from my first mentor, do not judge a book by its cover. I care very much deeply about spirituality in my spiritual life, but it is rarely that you will see me in a ceremony shirt unless it's ceremony. Because to me, the real OGs, you're not supposed to know who can do what. You don't need to proclaim your spirituality or especially proclaim your gifts, right? Like let your work speak for itself. Let God speak for you, if you don't need to open your mouth. Like your God energy will be felt by others. So some of the people I've seen in ceremony clothes have been false prophets, some have not, and then some people just in t-shirts and jeans or, you know, everyday clothes are the real OGs. And that was my second time that I had seen that and learned that that was a major lesson. I also learned how important it was for me to come back and work on my light body, of what you can do in your light body. It is like the Christ consciousness of what Yeshua is trying to show us, of what we can really do within our light body. The third takeaway is it was a beginning indicator that I really wanted to help my brothers and sisters wake up as Earth Mother and as God is calling us to wake up. Wake up out of the matrix, get the feeding tubes out of our mouths and out of our backs and out of our necks, out of this artificial matrix system that is very much like the movie. It was like a first calling to be like, oh, I see now. Okay. And I have so much more work to do in order to be able to help people. And sharing my story is some of that. And so that is just a little bit of a short story of some of my first ceremonies and some of the things that I learned. And, for those of you that have done these types of ceremonies or are thinking about doing these types of ceremonies, like, again, I just pray that you prep your space, that you know who you're going to be working with, and that you do serious preparation and prayer over your journey, and that you have a beautiful and blessed journey. If you have never done it before and you have questions, listen, we have in my open arms healing and in True Kings, right? For people that are going into ceremony, for open arms healing, you can just come ask in during our free spiritual Q&A, right? Like you can just DM me on socials and ask me, right? Like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Like, I'll get back to people because this is a community. But all that to be said, like, I'm here to help people, and any way I can be of service and your guidance on your journey, I would be super grateful. But for right now, I'm just sharing my story while building up these other things. So thank you for listening. Blessings.